So if you own a 70 series with the 1HD-FTE engine and you get this weird exhaust brake sounding noise coming through the firewall, so many people are looking for this all the time, and it's a pretty simple one. It's definitely fuel line vibration coming through and feeding back from the injector pump on this model. And this one had an upgrade done by Toyota where they put in this sort of literally like a fuel line bellow to try and isolate and get rid of that vibration in there. By putting in a bit of a reservoir of fuel. That made no difference. At the end of the day, every time we've seen this happen, this bracket here has a little bolt underneath there, is loose, and of course that whole fuel line right along the firewall and up onto that top mount, which is solid, vibrates in a frequency and feeds this unusual sound just like an exhaust brake when you're coming down in revs or going up in revs at a particular point, usually lower in the rev range, not high up. And guys have done everything, rebuilt injector pumps and done all sorts of crazy things looking for it. But 9.9 times out of 10 we find this bracket here, the vibration has virtually nearly stripped the nut down the bottom, and of course it comes loose. So nip it up. This one's sort of nipped, but even the nut feels a bit funny. So you know, eventually one day probably you could just get rid of it and put even rubber fuel lines in, it'll be the go, so you don't have any more vibration. But yes, it is pulsing, that injector pump. It's amazing the pulsations that happen with fuel lines, etc. on a diesel. Those lines there, of course, get very high frequency ones. That's why they've got to be bolted on, otherwise they break. But the main fuel line here and this modification that Toyota do may not always be the answer, and generally it's not. In this case it wasn't. So get down the back of your engine bay, give this bracket a bit of a wiggle. It's now solid, but it was as loose as anything before, and now that weird exhaust brake noise is gone. So 1HD FTE engines, owners of the 70 series, have a listen to that, fix your problem, and you're all done. To see more of these interesting videos, look us up at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Look us up at berrimadiesel.com. You can find out more about looking after your diesel.